Let's go to Tanzania in Dar es Salaam, where our international news editor, Sophie Mokoena, is on standby with a conversation with former President Thabo Mbeki.
The news came to us while we were already in Dar es Salaam. It came as a shock, though in fact I expected it. You are talking with somebody who was quite old. I had met her in Gaborone, and you could see that this is indeed an old person. Sooner or later, they would have to go, but still, it came as a shock, and indeed condolences to the family, and condolences also to her movement and the women of our country. She, as you know, a very prominent women's leader, and so perhaps some things that some people may not know, that she was also a prominent leader in terms of the democratic international women's movement, recognized by the international women's movement as one of their leaders, apart from being a leader in South Africa. She's one of the last of a particular generation, a generation which made such an enormous contribution to our liberation of our country, right up to Freedom 94, and then reconstruction of a democratic South Africa. It's a serious loss, and as I say, condolences to the family, to the ANC, to the women, and I hope that when we finally lay it to rest, I hope that it's done in a manner that really respects the dignity of this person.
Mr. President, Africa Day today, yesterday, the lecture, you challenged Africans to be really involved in issues that are related to Africa. But the question is that message resonating with Africans themselves on the continent, in the diaspora? Or it's just, message that doesn't really get to be, taken seriously, and the implementation thereof to see this Africa a prosperous continent in future?
First of all, Sophie, with regard to that, I must say thank you very much to the SABC for what it has done to communicate what we've been trying to communicate around the matter of Africa Day, including yesterday, to try and get that message to as much of Africa as possible. I really want to say thanks to the SABC for that. It's a big challenge, because my sense, I may very well be wrong, but my sense is that the commitment to a Pan-Africanist perspective among our leadership, from South Africa right up to the Mediterranean, North Africa, generally has receded. I've been saying that Mwalimu raised this thing, Nyerere, once when he delivered some speech and said, yes, indeed, we must fight for the liberation of our countries and gain independence for our countries, but we must be very careful that then the protection of that independence of my country and its development subtracts attention to the Pan-African perspective. So the perspective just becomes national. He warned against this, and I think that's part of what's happening on the continent. And therefore, the issue that you raise is the continent listening to this call that together as Africans, we must identify our common problems, respond to them together, define our own shared destiny. Is that happening? Not to the extent that it should. And I'm saying, I think essentially because this passion of a Pan-Africanist perspective is diminished across the continent.
Mr. President, you speak about Africa working together, and people are saying at this challenging time, global challenges, let's take for an example a country like South Africa. We saw our president going to the United States of America at the Oval Office, engaging with President Trump. We know that the intention was to reset the trade relations due to the posture President Trump has taken against South Africa. We've spoken about this matter many times. You indicated your views around this, and you were still confident that this relationship can be resuscitated. But what we saw at the Oval Office, a real drama. I mean, you are optimistic that the relationship can be revived, but watching how America engaged with us, are you still optimistic that the Trump administration is prepared to listen to South Africa?
Well, the first thing, Sophie, I'd like to say in that context is I think looking at the US, we must always be conscious of the fact that behind President Trump or any other president, they are the American people. And I think as South Africa, we would not want a relationship between ourselves and the people of the United States, a relationship that is hostile. I think we wouldn't. It's not in our interest, it's even the history of both countries militates against that. So we've got to do everything to make sure that that link between us, South African people, and people of the United States is not disturbed by wrong things. The matter about the engagement of the US government clearly is part of that. And I think we should not give up making sure that South Africa's positions are properly represented, that where there is a misconception by the United States government, President Trump and so on, about what South Africa is and what South Africa is doing, we correct that. To battle for a particular relationship with the people of the United States, even against wrong positions that might be taken by their government. I think it's vital, and I really think, Sophie, you know very well, that during our struggle against apartheid, we had extensive relations with the American population. To the point, for instance, where a Republican president, very popular Republican president, like President Reagan, who vetoed an anti-apartheid act, it's other Republicans in the US Congress who led the campaign to override that veto, which they did. So it tells you, that's an example, that the American people, they were very much at variance. The Republican Party was very much at variance with the Republican president. And they went ahead on a coalition on the South African issue. I think we mustn't lose that relationship with the American people, who I'm quite certain entertained the same position that they had during that struggle in favor of the victory against apartheid. They would stand in that position now in the favor of the victory against poverty and all of that. And an engagement with the US administration, frank, open, must help to advance that. So you are right. I mean, what happened at the White House with all of those videos and all that and pictures, and it's puzzling to me that you got a president who believes just absolute lies, but he believes in them. They look at these crosses, white crosses, and things like that. But we have a task to make sure that we get the people of the United States on our side.
Let's move to the continent again. It's Africa Month. The DRC, former President Kabila was in South Africa. He visited you, he spoke to us. And now we are told he's back in the DRC. The government is saying he's supporting the rebels and therefore destabilizing the country. And now they have lifted the privileges that he had. Are you following what's happening in the DRC? Have you spoken to former President Kabila?
No, I've not spoken to him since he left South Africa. I'm sure I will be able to speak to him at some point. But the problem, Sophie, is that the government in Kinshasa, like many others, including Joseph Kabila's government, the government in Kinshasa, I don't think has properly understood the Congo, its challenges, and therefore provide the right solutions. You know, when Patrice Lumumba led the liberation struggle for the liberation of the Congo, they had a view about this is the colonial Congo that we are inheriting from the Belgians. This is the new Congo that we want. And a very important element of that was to say we must unite the Congolese people. That was part of the Lumumba's revolution. Whatever the Belgian colonialists had done to divide the Congolese people, we as his Congolese revolutionaries must unite. That's part of the problem. When the government in Kinshasa is hostile to the Banyamulenge in the Eastern Congo because they are Rwandan speaking, these are Congolese. Or take a posture like the one they are taking now about President Kabila. As you know, Joseph Kabila comes from Katanga.
Katanga region.
He comes from the Katanga region. You take a position in Kinshasa, you say, he's a traitor, he's supporting M23, we want to punish him. The whole population of Katanga is going to be against that government in Kinshasa. It doesn't solve anything for the government in Kinshasa or the Congo. Because I'm saying that the governments in Kinshasa, even the current government, has not understood what was very clearly understood by Patrice Lumumba and others, that the task of the unification of the Congo is very important. Because they were governed under a colonial system. It was not in that interest of the colonial system to unite these Congolese. It was to govern them in such a they're weak, in a weak way, so that they're all weak to rebel against the colonial system. If you continue that, you are just asking for trouble.
Mr. President, now the DRC government is working with the Americans to try and resolve that conflict. Do you think a solution outside the continent will be a lasting one?
No, I think the notion that you can negotiate that the government of the Congo and the government of Rwanda must meet and sign a peace agreement is fine. That's going to solve the problems of the Eastern Congo is wrong. This has been tried before, and we keep saying to the people, to everybody, the problems of the Eastern Congo are domestic to the Congo. They don't originate from outside of the borders of the Congo. So whatever the Americans have been doing to encourage Kinshasa and Kigali to get together and something, it does not solve the problems of the Congo. That problem must be solved by the Congolese people. So what the Africans have said, you remember when SADC and the East African Community get together, we must encourage the peacemaking among the Congolese. Kinshasa must talk to the M23. They must sort out all of this. That is the correct posture. Sure, you can talk to Uganda, Rwanda, and so on about what their own attitude towards the Congo is. But that the solution to the Congolese problem of the Banyamulenge does not lie in Kigali. It lies in Kinshasa.
The other issue, Mr. President, the Sahel region, in recent time, we've seen Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso having this pact. And we've seen reports in terms of what's happening in Burkina Faso currently. Have you interacted with Sahel region, those young generals, because you want a united Africa? What's your view of that situation?
When the coup took place in Burkina Faso, that removed Blaise Compaoré. And military governments were formed. They were in touch with the foundation all the time.
The generals?
Yes, the military governments of Burkina Faso. Just now, last week, a week before last, just now in the last few days, you remember they unveiled this monument to Thomas Sankara. So Captain Traore wrote to me to say, you must come to this occasion. I couldn't, I was in Europe at the time, I was in Switzerland for the South Center. So the foundation explained that, and then they insisted that no, send a delegation anyway. That's why there was a foundation delegation which went there. And they are saying the military in Burkina Faso, which is what they've been saying since the removal of Blaise Compaoré, that they would like to work with the foundation because they think the foundation can help them in terms of helping to say, where do we go to from here with regard to Burkina Faso. You remember last year, the foundation had a peace conference on the Magaliesberg Mountains. There was somebody from the government of Niger. Came also with the same message. I have an invitation from the government of Mali. They want me to come there because they are saying that we need to look at work that was done, like on Timbuktu and so on, in order to say what should be done next. So we are in contact with all three governments in the Sahel, and they're asking for us to work with them to help to determine what happens next in their countries.
So you will be traveling to Sahel region at some point in time, Burkina Faso in particular, to meet Traore?
No, I think Mali.
Mali.
I think we'll have to go to Mali, and we are requesting the Malians to ensure that while we're in Bamako, they arrange that we meet, that delegations from Niger and Burkina Faso that come. That's what we are proposing. That is the first step.
Mr. President, are you not going to be seen as endorsing the coup leaders?
No, there's a very, very important issue that's been raised by the military coups in those Sahel countries, which is the defeat of French neocolonialism. That our countries, since independence, have had this neocolonial relationship with France, which must end so that you have genuinely independent African countries. I know that from the time we were working on Cote d'Ivoire, we came across exactly that point, where you have a French military garrison in Abidjan with the commander of France, empowered to intervene as whenever he thought it was necessary for security reasons, whatever. So I'm saying that our connection with the military governments, Sahel states, is informed by that. We can understand very well what they are trying to do is to move their countries towards genuine independence. So that's why we've been working with them. It's not to support military coups, but to support this notion of an independent Africa, genuinely independent.
As we wrap up, Mr. President, your message to Africans on the continent on this important day.
I thought, Sophie, that our panel yesterday identified correctly many of the challenges about quality of leadership that was raised, the perpetuation of a colonial structural relationship between our countries and former colonies, as a result of which dependence continues and gets worse, as was said, issues of governance, question that was raised, for instance, one of them said, I want to say to the South Africans, the Freedom Charter says the people shall govern. When you look at yourselves, are the people governing? And said that question applies to the rest of the continent. So I'm saying that I think that as a continent, we need to identify what are these major challenges in order to be able to say what is it that we do together to respond to that. As a continuing challenge, because we still don't have an agreement. We might say silence the guns, of course everybody will agree. But in order to understand in a fundamental way what the real problems are, these are the real problems that were being discussed yesterday by our panel, Africa Day. And then you need to go further than that in addition to identifying the problems to answer the question what is to be done. I think that's our common task.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for your time. Where are we going next Africa Day?
Well, our agreement as we alternate between South Africa and another African country. So that's what I'm insisting, but there are people who are saying no, let's do the next session in another African country, not go back to South Africa. I don't know if that will be the case, but there's a
What will be the country that you would want to go to?
I sense a strong view in the foundation in favor of Algeria.
Algeria. Why?
Well, naturally, because Algeria is an old partner of the struggle for liberation in South Africa. It will be the easiest one for us to go to. To say we must go to North Africa, when I say, okay, North Africa, where? Which country? Do we go to Libya? No. Let's go to Algeria. Because it's an old colleague of its own comrades in arms. So it may very well be that either we go back to South Africa or we go to Algeria.
Thank you so much for your time, former President. That was former President Thabo Mbeki speaking to us here in Dar es Salaam on Africa Day. Back to you in studio.
Sophie Mokoena, the SABC News international editor, in conversation with former President Thabo Mbeki. To say I was fascinated and gripped by that conversation would be an understatement. This is the week ahead here on SABC News. We're back with more news for you in just a moment.